Stop the car, now! The words cut through the rain like broken glass. Claire Hart had been invisible for so long she'd forgotten what it felt like to be seen, truly seen, by anyone who mattered. But when Malcolm Cross locked eyes with her through the tinted window of his black SUV, something shifted in the universe. She was soaked to the bone, her baby Lily barely whimpering against her chest, both of them shaking under a threadbare blanket that had long stopped offering warmth. People had passed her all evening, some with pity, most with disgust, all with the same conclusion. She was another fraud, another addict, another problem the city couldn't solve. But Malcolm saw something different. He saw a mother. He saw a fight that hadn't ended. And in that single moment, he made a choice that would unravel both their lives in ways neither could predict. If you're watching, drop a comment with your city. I want to see how far this story travels, and how many hearts it touches along the way. The rain came down in sheets that night, the kind of cold, unforgiving rain that soaked through fabric and skin and settled deep in the bones. It hammered the cracked pavement of 7th Street, turning gutters into rivers and sidewalks into shallow pools that reflected the neon glow of storefronts and traffic lights. The city moved around Claire Hart like she was a ghost, commuters rushing past with umbrellas tilted low, couples huddled close under shared canopies, delivery drivers cursing the weather as they double-parked and sprinted inside. No one looked at her. No one except the ones who wanted to make sure she knew she didn't belong. Claire sat beneath the awning of a closed electronics store, her back pressed against the metal grate, her knees drawn up to protect the small bundle in her arms. Lily was 8 months old, though she looked smaller, too small, too pale, too quiet. Her tiny lips were tinged faintly blue, her breathing shallow and uneven. Claire had wrapped her in everything she had, a donated baby blanket, a torn hoodie, her own jacket, but it wasn't enough. It was never enough. "Ma'am, you can't stay here." The voice belonged to a security guard, middle-aged and tired, his tone flat with repetition. Claire didn't look up. "I'm not blocking anything," she said quietly. "Store policy, you gotta move." "She's cold," Claire whispered, her voice breaking. "Please, just until the rain stops." The guard's jaw tightened. He glanced at the baby, then away, like looking too long might cost him something. "I don't make the rules. Move along." Claire's hands trembled as she gathered the blanket tighter around Lily and forced herself to stand. Her legs were stiff, her shoes soaked through, blisters raw against her heels. She'd been walking for hours, shelter to shelter, all full, all turning her away with the same apologetic shrug. One woman had told her to try the church on 9th. Another said the church was closed for renovations. A third had simply looked at her and said, "You should have planned better," as if poverty was a failure of imagination, as if love could fill a stomach or warm a body against winter rain. Claire moved down the block, her vision blurring with exhaustion and tears she refused to let fall. Lily whimpered softly, a sound so faint it could have been the wind. Claire pressed her lips to the baby's forehead and felt the heat there. Too much heat, the kind that meant fever, that meant danger, that meant she was running out of time. "It's okay, baby," she whispered. "Mama's got you. Mama's got you." But the words felt hollow, even to her. She stopped beneath a flickering traffic light at the intersection of 7th and Grant, where the rain seemed to fall harder, where the wind cut through her like a blade. Her legs gave out, and she sank onto the wet curb, clutching Lily against her chest, her body curled protectively around the only thing in the world that still mattered. People passed. A man in a business suit glanced at her, then crossed to the other side of the street. A woman with groceries muttered something under her breath, something that sounded like disgusting or pathetic, and quickened her pace. A teenager filmed her on his phone for 3 seconds, laughed, then kept walking. Claire closed her eyes and let the rain wash over her. She thought about Ethan, about the way he used to hold her, the way he'd promised they'd figure it out together. She thought about the morning she'd told him she was pregnant, the way his face had gone pale, the way he'd kissed her forehead and said he just needed to clear his head. She thought about how he'd walked out that door and never came back. No call, no text, no explanation, just gone. And she'd been alone ever since, alone in a world that had no patience for women like her, Women who'd grown up in foster care, who'd aged out of the system with nothing but a trash bag of belongings and a high school diploma that meant less than the paper it was printed on. She'd worked. God, she'd worked. Waitressing, cleaning hotel rooms, stocking shelves at a 24-hour drugstore. But every job had been temporary, every paycheck barely enough to cover rent in a roach-infested studio that still cost more than she could afford. And when she'd gotten pregnant, when her body had started to show, when she'd needed time off for doctor's appointments she couldn't pay for, she'd been let go. Quietly, politely, legally. The system didn't care. The world didn't care. And now, sitting on a curb in the rain with her dying baby in her arms, Claire wondered if she cared anymore either. Then the SUV slowed. At first she didn't notice. Her eyes were closed, her mind somewhere far away, somewhere warm and safe that didn't exist. But the sound of the engine idling pulled her back, and when she opened her eyes, she saw it. A sleek black SUV, raindrops streaming down its tinted windows, stopped in the middle of the intersection like it had all the time in the world. The back window rolled down, and Malcolm Cross looked directly at her. He was a striking man, tall, broad-shouldered, with sharp features and dark eyes that carried the weight of someone who'd seen too much and felt too deeply. He wore a tailored charcoal suit, the kind that cost more than Claire had made in 6 months, and his expression was unreadable. Neither pity nor judgment, just something raw and immediate. "Stop the car," he said to his driver. "Now." The driver, a lean man in his 50s with graying temples, glanced in the rearview mirror. "Sir, we're already late for the—" "Stop the car." The SUV pulled to the curb. Malcolm didn't wait for the driver to open his door. He pushed it open himself and stepped into the rain. The downpour soaked his suit instantly, darkening the fabric, plastering his hair to his forehead. He didn't flinch. He didn't hesitate. He walked straight to Claire and knelt down on the wet pavement, eye level with the baby in her arms. Claire stared at him, too stunned to speak. "When did she last eat?" Malcolm asked quietly. His voice was steady, controlled, but there was something underneath it, something urgent and aching. Claire's throat tightened. "Yesterday," she whispered. Malcolm's jaw clenched. He reached out slowly, carefully, and touched the back of his hand to Lily's cheek. The baby's skin was burning. He pulled back and met Claire's eyes. "What's her name?" "Lily." "How old?" 8 months. Malcolm nodded once, then stood and turned to his driver. "Marcus, find the nearest diner. Somewhere quiet. Somewhere warm." Marcus hesitated. "Sir, the board meeting—" "Forget the meeting. Mr. Cross, they're expecting—" Malcolm's voice dropped, cold and final. "I said forget it." Marcus swallowed and nodded. "Yes, sir." Malcolm turned back to Claire and extended his hand. She looked at it like it might disappear if she blinked, like this was some kind of hallucination brought on by exhaustion and desperation. "Come on," he said gently. "Let's get her warm." Claire took his hand. The diner was small, tucked between a laundromat and a check-cashing store, with cracked vinyl booths and fluorescent lights that buzzed faintly overhead. It smelled like coffee and grease and something sweet, cinnamon rolls maybe, or pie. The few patrons inside looked up when Malcolm walked in, their eyes widening at the sight of a man in a $1,000 suit standing in the doorway, soaking wet, holding the door open for a homeless woman and her baby. The waitress, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and a name tag that read Donna, grabbed a stack of napkins and hurried over. "Lord, honey, you're drenched," she said to Claire. "Come sit down. Come on." She led them to a corner booth, away from the windows, and draped a clean towel over Claire's shoulders. Malcolm slid into the seat across from her, water dripping from his suit onto the floor. He didn't seem to notice. "What can I get you?" Donna asked, her pencil poised over her notepad. Malcolm didn't look at the menu. "Scrambled eggs, toast, hash browns, hot chocolate, and warm milk for the baby." "Right away." Donna disappeared into the kitchen. Claire sat frozen, her arms still wrapped around Lily, her mind struggling to catch up with what was happening. Malcolm leaned back against the booth, his eyes never leaving hers. "What's your name?" he asked. "Claire," she said softly. "Claire Hart." "Malcolm Cross." She nodded, though she already knew who he was. Everyone in the city knew Malcolm Cross. He was the founder and CEO of Cross Tech Industries, a tech company that had gone from a garage startup to a billion-dollar empire in less than a decade. His face had been on magazine covers, in business profiles, in think pieces about black excellence and economic mobility. He was the kind of man who moved through the world like he owned it, because, in many ways, he did. And now he was sitting across from her in a diner, soaking wet, watching her like she mattered. Donna returned with the food, setting it down gently in front of Claire. The eggs were fluffy, the toast golden, the hash browns crispy and salted just right. Claire stared at the plate like it was a mirage. "Eat," Malcolm said quietly. She picked up the fork with trembling hands and took a bite. The taste exploded on her tongue, warm, rich, real. She hadn't realized how hungry she was until that moment, and suddenly she was eating like someone might take the plate away, like this might be her last meal, like she had to prove she deserved it. Malcolm watched her without speaking. When Donna brought the warm milk, he tested it on his wrist first, then handed the bottle to Claire. She fed Lily slowly, carefully, and the baby latched on with desperate urgency, her tiny hands gripping the bottle like a lifeline. "When's the last time you slept?" Malcolm asked. Claire's eyes filled with tears. "I don't know. Where are you staying?" "Nowhere. Shelters are full." "Family?" She shook her head. "Foster care. Aged out at 18. Malcolm's expression didn't change, but something flickered behind his eyes, something that looked like recognition, like pain held at a distance. "And Lily's father?" Claire's voice broke. "Gone." Malcolm didn't press. He just nodded and let the silence settle between them. When Claire finished eating, when Lily had drained the bottle and fallen asleep in her arms, Malcolm reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a sleek black business card. He set it on the table and slid it toward her. "Call me in 3 hours," he said. "I'll get you somewhere safe." Claire stared at the card. It was simple, elegant. Just his name, a phone number, and the Crosstech logo embossed in silver. "Why?" she whispered. Malcolm met her eyes. "Because someone should have stopped for my mother when she needed it, and no one did." Before Claire could respond, he stood, dropped $200 bills on the table, and walked out into the rain. Claire sat in the booth long after he was gone, the card clutched in her hand, Lily warm and sleeping against her chest. Donna refilled her coffee without asking, then left her alone. The rain continued to fall outside, but for the first time in months, Claire felt something she thought she'd lost forever. Hope. 3 hours, she thought. 3 hours, and everything changes. She tucked the card carefully into the pocket of her jeans right next to her heart and closed her eyes. But when she stood to leave, when she adjusted Lily in her arms and pushed open the diner door, the card slipped. It fell silently onto the wet pavement, landing face down in a shallow puddle near the curb. Claire didn't notice. She was too focused on keeping Lily dry, on finding somewhere to wait until the 3 hours were up. The rain washed over the card, blurring the ink, soaking the edges, and Claire walked away, unaware that her only lifeline was already gone. Malcolm sat in the back of the SUV, his phone in his hand, his eyes on the clock. Marcus had tried to redirect him to the office, but Malcolm had insisted on going home instead. He needed to think. He needed to process what he'd just done, and why. His brother Damon was flying in tonight from Atlanta. They hadn't seen each other in over a year, not since their mother's memorial. Damon had always been the emotional one, the one who carried their mother's memory like a torch. Malcolm had buried his grief in work, in building something that mattered, in proving that their mother's sacrifices hadn't been in vain. But tonight, looking into Claire's eyes, he'd seen his mother. He'd seen the same exhaustion, the same desperation, the same refusal to give up even when the world had already decided she wasn't worth saving. His phone buzzed. A text from his assistant. "Board meeting rescheduled. Everything okay?" Malcolm didn't respond. He just stared at the screen, waiting for a call that hadn't come yet. 3 hours, he thought, and he believed she'd call. But across the city, Claire was tearing through her pockets, her hands shaking, her breath coming in short, panicked gasps. The card was gone. She checked the stroller. Nothing. She checked the sidewalk where she'd been standing. Nothing. She ran back to the diner, her legs burning, her lungs screaming, Lily crying in her arms. Donna looked up from the counter. "Honey, what's wrong?" "A card," Claire gasped. "A business card. Did you see it? Did anyone turn it in?" Donna shook her head. "I'm sorry, sweetheart. I haven't seen anything." Claire searched the booth, the floor, the trash. Nothing. She stumbled back outside, her vision blurring with tears, and dropped to her knees on the wet pavement. She ran her hands over the ground, searching, hoping, praying, but the card was gone. And so was her chance. Claire's knees hit the pavement hard enough to send pain shooting up her legs, but she barely felt it. The rain had picked up again, coming down in relentless sheets that turned the streetlights into blurred halos and the gutters into rushing streams. Her hands scraped across the wet concrete, fingers searching desperately through puddles and cracks, through cigarette butts and gum wrappers, and the debris of a city that had never cared about people like her. "Please," she whispered to no one, to the rain, to God if he was listening. "Please, please, please." Lily wailed in the stroller beside her, the sound piercing and raw, and Claire wanted to scream with her. She wanted to rage at the universe that had given her one moment of hope, only to rip it away before she could even hold on to it properly. But she couldn't afford to break down. She couldn't afford anything except to keep moving, keep searching, keep fighting. She checked every inch of sidewalk between the diner and the corner where Malcolm had first stopped. She retraced her steps 3 times, her clothes soaked through, her hair plastered to her face, her hands numb from the cold. A passing jogger gave her a wide berth, eyeing her like she might be dangerous. A couple leaving a bar laughed at something on their phone and didn't even glance her direction. The card was gone, and with it, any chance of the life Malcolm had offered. Claire finally stopped searching when her legs wouldn't hold her anymore. She collapsed onto a bench near a closed coffee shop, pulled Lily from the stroller, and held her daughter against her chest while they both cried. The baby's fever had broken slightly from the warm milk, but she was still too hot, still too fragile, still depending on a mother who kept failing her in every way that mattered. "I'm sorry, baby," Claire sobbed into Lily's damp hair. "I'm so sorry, Mama tried. Mama tried so hard." But trying didn't pay for formula or diapers. Trying didn't find shelter or medicine or safety. Trying was just another word for failing slowly instead of all at once. The hours crawled by. Claire watched the clock on a bank building across the street, watched the numbers change from 9 to 10 to 11. Somewhere across the city, Malcolm was probably checking his phone, wondering why she hadn't called, confirming what he'd probably suspected all along, that she was just another charity case who'd take the free meal and disappear, just another person who couldn't be saved because she didn't really want to be. The thought made her chest ache worse than the cold or the hunger or the exhaustion. He'd looked at her like she mattered, like Lily mattered, like their lives were worth disrupting a board meeting and ruining an expensive suit and sitting in a rundown diner with people who would never shop at the stores that sold his products. And she'd lost the only piece of proof that it had been real. Around midnight, Claire gave up on the bench and started walking again. She knew she needed to find shelter before the temperature dropped any lower, before Lily's fever came back, before her own body simply gave out from exhaustion and hypothermia. There was an abandoned construction site about 6 blocks east. She'd passed it 2 days ago and noted the gap in the fence, the unfinished building with its skeletal frame and concrete floors. It wasn't warm, but it was dry. It wasn't safe, but nothing was. She pushed the stroller through streets that grew progressively emptier, past darkened storefronts and locked churches and apartment buildings where people slept in beds with clean sheets and didn't worry about whether their babies would wake up in the morning. The construction site loomed ahead, a shadow against the night sky, all exposed steel beams and plastic tarps flapping in the wind. Claire found the gap in the fence exactly where she remembered it and maneuvered the stroller through, wincing as the wheels caught on loose gravel and uneven ground. The building's ground floor was open to the elements on 2 sides, but the back corner had been framed in with drywall that offered some protection from the wind. She parked the stroller there and lifted Lily out, wrapping her in every piece of fabric she had, the blanket, the hoodie, her own jacket laid over the top like a tent. "It's okay," she whispered, even though it wasn't. "We're okay." She lay down on the cold concrete beside Lily, curled her body around her daughter like a human shield, and closed her eyes. Sleep came in broken fragments, interrupted by the baby's whimpering, by the sound of rats scurrying through the debris, by the bone-deep cold that made her muscles cramp and her teeth chatter. She dreamed of warm beds and full refrigerators and Ethan's arms around her, and woke each time to the reality of concrete and darkness and the weight of failure pressing down on her chest. Somewhere across the city, in a penthouse overlooking the financial district, Malcolm Cross stood at his floor-to-ceiling windows and stared at his phone. The screen was dark. No missed calls. No messages. He'd checked it 17 times in the past 3 hours. "She's not going to call, man." The voice belonged to Damon Cross, who sat on the leather sofa behind Malcolm with a glass of whiskey in his hand and concern etched into his features. He'd arrived an hour ago, and Malcolm had filled him in on the evening's events. The woman in the rain, the baby with blue lips, the business card that was supposed to be a lifeline. "She will," Malcolm said quietly. "It's been 5 hours. Maybe she needed more time." Damon set his glass down and stood, crossing the room to stand beside his brother. They looked alike. Same height, same build, same sharp features inherited from their mother. But where Malcolm carried himself with controlled precision, Damon's energy was looser, warmer, more willing to show the cracks. "Or maybe she lost the card," Damon said gently. "Or maybe she's scared. Or maybe she doesn't trust that a billionaire actually gives a damn about some homeless woman he met on the street." Malcolm's jaw tightened. "I gave her my word. And she doesn't know you. She doesn't know that when Malcolm Cross gives his word, he means it." Damon paused, studying his brother's profile. "What are you really doing here, Mal?" "I'm trying to help someone who needs it." "No." Damon's voice was soft but firm. "You're trying to save Mom." The words hit like a physical blow. Malcolm turned to face his brother, his expression hardening. "Don't. It's been 3 years and you still can't talk about her. You bury yourself in work. You build empires. You donate millions to charity, but you won't say her name." Damon's eyes glistened. "That woman tonight, with her baby, alone, desperate, that was Mom. And you saw it. And you can't save Mom, so you're trying to save her instead." Malcolm's hands clenched into fists at his sides. "Maybe I am. Is that so wrong?" "No, it's human." Damon's voice broke slightly. "But you can't carry every person who reminds you of what we lost. You'll destroy yourself trying." "Then I'll destroy myself." Malcolm's voice was low, controlled, but there was steel underneath it. "Because the alternative is walking past people like Claire every single day and pretending I don't see them. Pretending their lives don't matter because they don't have the right address or the right last name or the right circumstances. Mom died because no one stopped. No one helped. No one gave a damn about a black single mother working 3 jobs to keep her kids fed." His voice rose slightly, passion bleeding through the composure. "So if I can stop for one person, if I can help one mother keep her baby alive, then that's what I'm going to do. And I don't care if it's messy or complicated or if it makes me look foolish." Damon was quiet for a long moment. Then he stepped forward and pulled his brother into a tight embrace. Malcolm resisted for half a second, then let himself lean into it, let himself feel the weight of everything he'd been holding. "Okay," Damon said quietly. "Okay. So what do we do?" Malcolm pulled back, wiping his eyes quickly. "We find her." "How? You don't even know her last name." "Hart. Claire Hart." Damon raised his eyebrows. "You got more than I thought." "I got enough." Malcolm moved to his desk and pulled up his computer. "Marcus saw where we picked her up. I'll have him drive the route again tomorrow morning, and I'll put the word out to the shelters, the soup kitchens, anywhere she might go. And if we don't find her," Malcolm's fingers paused over the keyboard, "we will." But he heard the doubt in his own voice. The night stretched on. Damon eventually fell asleep on the couch, but Malcolm stayed awake, his phone on the desk beside him, the screen lighting up periodically with work emails and news alerts, and everything except the one call he was waiting for. At 3 a.m, he finally allowed himself to consider the possibility that Damon was right. That Claire wasn't going to call, that she'd taken the meal and the money and moved on, or that something had happened to her, or that she simply didn't believe someone like him would actually follow through on a promise made to someone like her. The thought made him feel hollow. He thought about his mother, About the night she'd come home from her nursing shift so tired she could barely stand. About the way she'd still make them dinner and help with homework and tuck them in with stories about the life they'd have someday when things got better. She'd believed in better right up until the heart attack that took her at 52, alone in a hospital corridor during a double shift because they were short-staffed and she couldn't afford to say no to overtime. No one had stopped for her. No one had asked if she needed help. No one had seen her until it was too late. Malcolm picked up his phone and typed out a message to Marcus. Tomorrow morning, 6 a.m., we retrace the route. Don't care how long it takes. Marcus responded almost immediately. Yes, sir. Then Malcolm opened a new message and hesitated before typing. To anyone who might see this, if you know a woman named Claire Hart, white, mid-20s, with a baby girl named Lily, please contact me immediately. It's urgent. No questions asked. He posted it to his personal social media accounts, to the Crosstech company page, to every platform he had access to. Within minutes, the comments started rolling in. Questions, skepticism, people asking if it was a publicity stunt or a social experiment or some kind of corporate recruiting tactic. Malcolm ignored them all and kept refreshing his phone, waiting, hoping. The rain finally stopped around 4 in the morning. Claire woke to silence and the pale gray light of pre-dawn filtering through the gaps in the construction site's walls. Her body ached from the concrete floor. Her throat was raw, and Lily was hot again, too hot, the fever climbing back up despite the milk and the temporary warmth. She needed help, real help. Real, not just a meal and kind words, but actual medical care, shelter, resources. She needed the card she'd lost. The thought made her want to cry all over again, but she was too dehydrated for tears. She forced herself to sit up, forced herself to change Lily's diaper using the last one she had, forced herself to think clearly despite the fog of exhaustion and despair. There was one option left. Go back to the corner where Malcolm had first seen her. Wait there. Hope that maybe, just maybe, he'd come back looking for her the way she'd looked for the card. It was desperate. It was pathetic. It was all she had. Claire gathered their meager belongings, settled Lily into the stroller, and pushed through the gap in the fence as the sun began to rise over the city. The streets were slowly coming to life. Early morning joggers, delivery trucks, coffee shops cranking up their espresso machines. She walked the 6 blocks back to 7th and Grant, her legs trembling with fatigue, her mind focused on one single thought. Please come back. Please. She positioned herself on the same curb where she'd sat the night before, arranged the blanket over Lily, and waited. 1 hour passed, then 2. The morning rush started in earnest. Professionals in suits, students with backpacks, construction workers heading to job sites. Some people glanced at her. Most didn't. A woman dropped $1 in her lap without making eye contact. A man told her to get a job. A teenager offered her half a breakfast sandwich, which Claire accepted gratefully, and split with Lily, mashing the egg into tiny pieces the baby could gum. At 8:30, a black SUV turned onto 7th Street. Claire's heart stopped. It was the same vehicle. She recognized the license plate, the tinted windows, the sleek lines that screamed wealth and power. It slowed as it approached the intersection, and Claire stood up so quickly she almost dropped Lily. She stepped toward the curb, her whole body shaking, her mouth forming words she couldn't quite speak. The SUV pulled to a stop. But it wasn't Malcolm who stepped out. It was Marcus, the driver, his expression carefully neutral as he approached her. Claire's stomach dropped. Of course Malcolm hadn't come himself. Of course he'd sent someone else to confirm she was a lost cause, to report back that the homeless woman was exactly where he'd left her, exactly as broken as he'd suspected. "Ms. Hart?" Marcus said quietly. Claire nodded, not trusting her voice. Marcus glanced at Lily, then back at Claire. His expression softened almost imperceptibly. "Mr. Cross has been looking for you." The words didn't make sense. Claire blinked, her exhausted brain struggling to process them. "What?" "He expected you to call. When you didn't, he assumed something had happened." Marcus paused. "Did you lose the card?" Claire's face crumpled. "I tried. I swear I tried. I looked everywhere. I didn't mean to—" "It's okay." Marcus's voice was gentle, almost fatherly. "It's okay. I believe you." Those 3 words broke something open in Claire's chest. She started crying, deep, wrenching sobs that made Lily start crying too, both of them standing on a street corner in the morning light, holding on to each other like they were all each other had in the world. Because they were. Marcus waited until Claire had cried herself out, then carefully took the stroller's handle. "Come on, let's get you somewhere safe." Claire followed him to the SUV on legs that barely functioned. Marcus opened the back door and helped her inside, then gently lifted Lily and her stroller into the vehicle with a care that suggested he'd done this before, that he understood exactly how fragile and precious this moment was. As the SUV pulled away from the curb, Claire pressed her face against the window and watched the corner disappear behind them. She thought about all the people who'd passed her by, all the ones who'd looked through her like she was invisible, all the ones who'd confirmed what she'd always feared, that she didn't matter, that Lily didn't matter, that their suffering was just background noise in a city too busy to care. But Malcolm had cared, and he'd come back. The SUV wound through morning traffic, moving away from the downtown core toward a residential area Claire had never been to. Tree-lined streets with elegant brownstones, small parks with manicured lawns, the kind of neighborhood where people probably didn't lock their doors because crime was something that happened to other people in other places. They pulled up in front of a building that looked like it belonged in a movie, all brick and bay windows and a doorman who tipped his hat as Marcus got out. Claire hesitated, suddenly aware of how she must look, how she must smell, how utterly out of place she was in a setting like this. "It's okay," Marcus said again, as if he could read her mind. "Mr. Cross is expecting you." He helped her out of the SUV, carried Lily and the stroller, and led her through a lobby that was all marble floors and crystal chandeliers. The elevator rose smoothly, quietly, the numbers climbing until they reached the penthouse level. The doors opened directly into an apartment that made Claire's breath catch. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the entire city, the morning sun streaming through and casting everything in golden light. The space was modern but warm. Leather furniture, hardwood floors, art on the walls that probably cost more than Claire would make in a lifetime. And standing in the middle of it all, still wearing last night's suit, though he'd clearly been awake all night, was Malcolm Cross. His eyes found hers immediately. "I lost the card," Claire blurted out, the words tumbling over themselves. "I didn't mean to. I looked everywhere. I tried to call, but I didn't have the number and I didn't know how to find you, and I thought—" "It's okay," Malcolm said quietly, echoing Marcus's words. He crossed the room and stopped a few feet away from her, his hands in his pockets like he was trying to appear less intimidating. "You're here now. That's what matters." Claire started crying again. She hated it, hated being this broken, this vulnerable, this unable to hold herself together for even 5 minutes. But she was so tired of being strong, so tired of fighting, so tired of pretending that she wasn't drowning every single day. Malcolm didn't move closer. He just waited, giving her space to fall apart without judgment, without expectation. When she finally looked up, she saw Damon standing in the kitchen doorway, watching the scene with something like recognition in his eyes. "This is my brother Damon," Malcolm said. "He's going to help." Damon stepped forward and offered Claire a small smile. "Let's get you both cleaned up and fed, okay? Then we'll figure out the next steps." Claire nodded, not trusting herself to speak. Marcus had already set up the stroller in a corner, and Lily had fallen asleep despite the unfamiliar surroundings, her tiny body finally relaxing in the warmth and safety of a space that didn't smell like rain and concrete and desperation. Malcolm gestured toward a hallway. "There's a guest room this way. Bathroom attached. Take as long as you need." Claire followed him on shaking legs, acutely aware of the wet footprints she was leaving on his expensive floors. The guest room was bigger than any apartment she'd ever lived in. A king-sized bed with white linens, a sitting area with plush chairs, windows that overlooked a private garden she hadn't even known existed in the middle of the city. "I'll have Marcus bring up some clothes," Malcolm said, "and we'll get formula and diapers for Lily. Whatever you need." "Why are you doing this?" The question came out before Claire could stop it. Malcolm turned to face her fully, and for the first time she saw past the wealth and the power to the grief underneath. "Because someone should have done it for my mother, and no one did." He left before she could respond, closing the door softly behind him. Claire stood in the middle of the room for a long moment, then walked to the bathroom and turned on the shower. The water ran hot immediately, steam filling the small space, and she stripped off her filthy clothes and stepped under the spray. She cried again as she washed away days of dirt and rain and fear, as she used soap that smelled like lavender and shampoo that made her hair feel human again. She stayed under the water until it started to run cool, then wrapped herself in a towel so soft it felt like a luxury she didn't deserve. When she emerged, she found clothes laid out on the bed, jeans, a sweater, undergarments still in their packaging, thick socks. Everything was her size, though she had no idea how they'd known. She dressed slowly, her hands still trembling slightly, and caught sight of herself in the full-length mirror. She looked like a person again. Not invisible, not disposable, not lost, just a person. There was a soft knock on the door, and Damon's voice called out, "Claire? You okay in there?" She opened the door to find him holding Lily, who'd been bathed and dressed in clean clothes, a soft pink onesie, and tiny socks with little bows on them. The baby looked content, fed, her fever finally broken. "Figured you might want a minute to yourself," Damon said, handing Lily over carefully. "She's a fighter, this one." Claire held her daughter close and felt something shift in her chest, something that felt dangerously close to hope. "She gets that from her mother," Claire whispered, pressing her lips to Lily's forehead. The baby's skin was finally cool to the touch, her breathing steady and deep in the way that meant real sleep, not the fitful half-consciousness of fever and fear. Damon's smile was warm but tinged with something melancholy. "Come on, Malcolm's got breakfast ready. And knowing him, he's made enough to feed 20 people because he doesn't know how to cook for just 3. Claire followed him down the hallway, Lily nestled against her shoulder, and emerged into an open-concept living space that somehow felt both grand and intimate. The kitchen was all gleaming stainless steel and white marble countertops, and Malcolm stood at the stove in jeans and a t-shirt, looking more human than he had in the suit. He glanced up when they entered, and something in his expression softened when he saw Claire holding Lily. "She looks better," he said. "Thanks to you." Claire's voice was barely above a whisper. "Both of us." Malcolm turned back to the stove, flipping pancakes with the kind of focused concentration that suggested he was more comfortable with action than with gratitude. "Sit, please." Claire settled into a chair at the dining table while Damon took Lily and positioned himself on the floor with her, building a tower out of soft blocks he'd produced from somewhere. The baby watched with wide eyes, her tiny hands reaching for the bright colors, and for the first time in weeks, she made a sound that wasn't crying, a small, curious coo that made Damon's whole face light up. "That's right, princess," he murmured. "You tell me which one you want." Malcolm brought over plates loaded with pancakes, scrambled eggs, bacon, fresh fruit arranged like it belonged in a magazine spread. He set one in front of Claire, then sat down across from her with his own. For a moment they ate in silence, the only sounds the soft clinking of silverware and Lily's occasional babbling as Damon entertained her. Claire tried to eat slowly, tried to maintain some semblance of dignity, but the food was incredible and she was starving on a level that went beyond physical hunger. This was the first meal in months where she hadn't had to worry about where the next one would come from, where she hadn't had to ration every bite, where she could actually taste what she was eating instead of just using it as fuel to survive another day. "Thank you," she said finally, setting down her fork. "I know I keep saying it, but I don't know what else to say. You didn't have to do any of this." Malcolm met her eyes. "Yes, I did." The certainty in his voice left no room for argument. Damon looked up from the blocks, his expression knowing, and Claire sensed there was a story here she didn't fully understand yet. Something deeper than just a wealthy man being charitable. "Our mother raised us alone," Damon said quietly, as if reading her thoughts. "She worked herself to death. Literally. Heart attack at 52, during a double shift at the hospital where she was a nurse." Claire's breath caught. "I'm sorry." "She used to tell us that hard work would pay off, that if we just kept pushing, kept believing, things would get better." Malcolm's voice was steady, but his hands were clenched around his coffee mug. "And they did get better for us. We built something. We made it. But she didn't live to see it. She died believing she'd failed us because we were still struggling, still barely making rent, still choosing between groceries and electricity." "She didn't fail," Claire said softly. "I know that. Now." Malcolm's jaw tightened. "But I also know that she shouldn't have had to work 3 jobs just to keep us fed. I know that people walked past her every day when she was exhausted and hurting and barely holding on, and nobody stopped. Nobody asked if she needed help. Nobody saw her until it was too late. The weight of those words settled over the table like a physical presence. Claire understood now why Malcolm had stopped his car in the rain, why he'd given her his card, why he was sitting here feeding her pancakes instead of being at whatever high-powered meeting he'd missed the night before. She wasn't just Claire Hart, homeless woman with a sick baby. She was the chance he'd never had to save his mother. The thought should have made her uncomfortable, should have felt like too much pressure, but instead it made her feel seen in a way she'd forgotten was possible. Not as a problem or a charity case or a sad story, but as a person whose life actually mattered to someone. "So what happens now?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "I'm grateful for the food and the shower and the bed for Lily, but I can't stay here. I need to figure out next steps, find work, get us somewhere stable." Damon and Malcolm exchanged a look that Claire couldn't quite read. Then Damon stood, scooped up Lily with practiced ease, and said, "I'm going to take this little one for a walk around the apartment. Let her see the view from the good windows." He disappeared down another hallway, leaving Claire alone with Malcolm. The silence stretched between them, not uncomfortable exactly, but heavy with things unsaid. Malcolm leaned back in his chair, studying her with an intensity that made her want to squirm. "Tell me about Lily's father." The question hit like a physical blow. Claire's hands clenched in her lap. "Why?" "Because I need to know if he's going to show up and complicate things. And because you deserve to tell someone what happened, if you want to." Claire stared at her empty plate, at the pattern of syrup and crumbs, at anything except Malcolm's two knowing eyes. When she finally spoke, her voice was raw with grief she'd buried for months. "His name was Ethan Cole. We met at the diner where I was waitressing. He was a delivery driver, came in every Tuesday and Thursday for coffee and pie." A small, sad smile touched her lips. "He always left huge tips, even when the service was terrible. Always had a joke ready. Always made me feel like I was someone worth noticing." She paused, remembering the way Ethan had looked at her. Like she was beautiful. Like she was smart. Like she had value beyond her ability to refill coffee cups and memorize orders. We started dating. Nothing fancy, walks in the park, movies on discount Tuesdays, cooking dinner together in my awful little studio apartment with the broken radiator and the mice in the walls. But it felt real. It felt like maybe I'd finally found someone who saw me, who wanted to build something with me. Malcolm nodded, but didn't interrupt. "When I got pregnant, I was terrified. We weren't ready. We could barely afford our own lives, let alone a baby. But Ethan," her voice broke. "Ethan was happy. He kissed me and said it was perfect timing, that we'd figure it out, that we were going to be a family." "What happened?" "I don't know." The admission tasted like failure. One morning, about 3 months in, I woke up and he was already dressed. Said he needed to go see someone, clear his head, make some plans. He kissed my forehead, told me he loved me, and walked out the door. That was the last time I saw him. Malcolm's expression darkened. "He just left?" "No calls, no texts. I went to his apartment the next day and the landlord said he'd moved out in the middle of the night, left no forwarding address. I called his phone for weeks until the number was disconnected. I asked everyone we knew, but nobody had heard from him. It was like he just vanished." "Did you file a missing persons report?" Claire laughed bitterly. "You think the police care about a disappeared delivery driver with no family and no permanent address?" "They took my report and I never heard from them again. Eventually, I had to accept that he'd made a choice. He didn't want to be a father. He didn't want me. So he left." She told herself that story so many times it had calcified into truth, hardened over the wound like scar tissue. But saying it out loud to Malcolm, she heard the cracks in it, the places where the narrative didn't quite add up. Ethan had loved her. She'd known it in her bones. People didn't fake that kind of devotion, that kind of gentleness, that kind of absolute certainty that they'd found the person they were meant to be with. But people also didn't just vanish without explanation. "I'm sorry," Malcolm said quietly. "That's not what you deserved. That's not what Lily deserved." Claire wiped her eyes quickly, angry at herself for crying again. "Doesn't matter now. He's gone. We're here. And I need to focus on building a life for her, not mourning someone who didn't want to be part of it." Malcolm was quiet for a long moment, his expression thoughtful. Then he stood and walked to the windows, hands in his pockets, looking out at the city spread below them. "I'm going to make you an offer," he said finally, "and I need you to really hear it before you respond." Claire's stomach tightened with anxiety. Here it comes, she thought. The catch, the price. The thing that would turn this kindness into something else entirely. "There's an apartment building I own about 3 miles from here. It's in a decent neighborhood, good schools nearby, safe streets. One of the units just opened up. 2-bedroom, updated kitchen, washer-dryer in unit. It's yours if you want it." Claire's heart raced. "I can't afford—" Malcolm turned to face her. "I'm not asking you to pay market rent. I'm asking you to pay what you can afford once you're working. And in the meantime, I'm offering you time to get on your feet without worrying about whether you and Lily will have a roof over your heads tonight." It was too much, too generous, too good to be true. Claire's instinct was to refuse, to protect herself from the inevitable moment when the offer turned out to have strings attached, when she'd be expected to repay this kindness with something she couldn't give. "Why?" she asked. "What do you get out of this?" Malcolm's expression was unreadable. "Peace. The knowledge that I didn't walk past someone who needed help, the chance to do for you what no one did for my mother. That's not enough. People don't just give away apartments to strangers out of the goodness of their hearts." "I do." His voice was firm. "And before you argue, let me be clear about something. This isn't charity. This isn't me trying to be a savior or play the hero. This is me recognizing that you're in a situation that isn't your fault, that you're fighting like hell to survive, and that with a little support, you could build the life you and Lily deserve. I have resources. You need resources. It's that simple." "Nothing's that simple." "You're right. It's not." Malcolm crossed his arms. "But it can be this straightforward. I own property. You need a place to live. I'm offering it. You can accept or refuse, but either way, there's no hidden agenda, no expectations beyond you taking care of yourself and Lily." Claire wanted to believe him. God, she wanted to believe him so badly it hurt. But a lifetime of disappointment had taught her that nothing came without a price, that people who seemed too good to be true usually were, that accepting help meant owing something you might not be able to pay back. "I need to think about it," she said finally. Malcolm nodded. "Fair enough. Take your time." Damon reappeared then with Lily, who'd fallen asleep against his shoulder, her tiny hand curled into his shirt. He looked at his brother, then at Claire, reading the tension in the room with the ease of someone who'd spent a lifetime interpreting Malcolm's moods. "Everything okay?" "We're good," Malcolm said. "Claire's just processing." Damon handed Lily back to Claire with careful reverence, and the baby stirred but didn't wake, her breath warm against Claire's neck. The weight of her daughter in her arms centered Claire, reminded her what this was really about. Not her pride, not her fear, not her inability to trust in kindness. Lily deserved stability. Lily deserved safety. Lily deserved a mother who was strong enough to accept help when it was offered, even if it scared the hell out of her. "Okay," Claire said quietly. "I'll take the apartment, but I'm going to pay you back. Every cent. I don't know how long it'll take, but I swear I'll— We'll figure it out," Malcolm interrupted gently. "One step at a time." The relief that washed over Claire was so intense it made her dizzy. She sank into the chair, holding Lily close, and let herself feel it, the first real hope she'd had since Ethan disappeared. The first belief that maybe they could actually survive this, that maybe the universe hadn't completely abandoned them after all. "There's one more thing," Damon said, pulling up a chair and sitting down across from Claire. His expression had shifted into something more serious, more businesslike. "You're going to need income. Malcolm mentioned you were waitressing before?" Claire nodded. "And cleaning hotel rooms, stocking shelves, pretty much anything that would hire me." "What do you actually want to do?" The question caught her off guard. Nobody had ever asked her that before. Every job had been about necessity, about survival, about taking whatever was available and being grateful for it. "I don't know," she admitted. "I never really thought about it. College wasn't an option after I aged out of foster care. I was too busy trying not to be homeless to think about careers." Damon leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. "Let me ask it differently. If you could do anything, anything at all, what would it be?" Claire thought about the small community garden she used to volunteer at before Lily was born, the way it had felt to watch things grow, to nurture something from seed to harvest. She thought about the satisfaction of organizing the donated goods at the shelter, of creating order out of chaos, of making systems that actually worked for people who needed them. I like helping people, she said slowly, and I'm good at organization, at seeing how things could work better, more efficiently. I used to reorganize the stockroom at every job I had because the systems they had were inefficient and made everything harder than it needed to be. Damon's eyes lit up. Operations, systems management. That's a skill set, Claire. That's something we can build on. I don't have a degree. I don't have certifications or references or you have experience. You have aptitude. You have drive. Damon glanced at Malcolm, who was watching the conversation with quiet interest. What if we found you something that would let you build those skills while earning a living wage? Something with benefits, room for growth, maybe even tuition assistance if you wanted to take classes eventually. It sounded too good to be true. It sounded like a fairy tale. But the way Damon was looking at her, like this was a real possibility, like her life was worth investing in, made her want to believe. What kind of something? She asked carefully. Malcolm spoke up. Crosstech partners with several nonprofits and community organizations. One of them runs a network of community resource centers, places where people can access social services, job training, food assistance, childcare. They're always looking for operations coordinators, people who can manage the day-to-day logistics and make sure things run smoothly. You'd be perfect for it, Damon added. You've lived through the system. You know where it fails. You could help make it better. Claire's throat tightened. The idea of turning her worst experiences into something useful, something that could help other people avoid the same pain, it felt almost redemptive, like maybe all the suffering hadn't been meaningless after all. I'll mess it up, she said quietly. I always mess things up. No, Malcolm's voice was firm. The system messed you up. There's a difference. And what I'm seeing right now is someone who kept her baby alive through circumstances that would have broken most people. That's not someone who messes up. That's someone who fights. And we need fighters. The conviction in his words made something crack open in Claire's chest, something that had been locked down tight for so long she'd forgotten it was there. Permission to believe in herself. Permission to imagine a future that wasn't just survival, but actual living. When could I start? She whispered. Damon grinned. Let's get you settled in the apartment first. Make sure Lily's fully recovered. Get you both comfortable. Then we'll set up some meetings, get you connected with the right people, see what fits. Claire nodded, afraid that if she spoke, she'd start crying again. Lily shifted in her arms, making a small sound of contentment, and Claire held her daughter closer, feeling the solid weight of her, the proof that they'd made it through the worst night and into something that looked almost like hope. The rest of the morning passed in a blur of logistics. Malcolm made phone calls while Damon drove Claire and Lily to the apartment, which turned out to be everything Malcolm had promised and more. The building was clean and well-maintained, with a small playground in the courtyard and neighbors who actually smiled and said hello. The apartment itself was bright and spacious, with windows that let in natural light and floors that didn't creak or slope or show signs of water damage. This is too much, Claire breathed, standing in the middle of the empty living room while Lily explored the space in her stroller, her eyes wide with curiosity. It's exactly enough, Damon corrected. Malcolm's having furniture delivered tomorrow, basics to start with, and you can add whatever else you need as you settle in. There's a crib for Lily, a proper bed for you, kitchen essentials. He's also setting up accounts at the grocery store and pharmacy downstairs, so you can get what you need without worrying about payment right now. I can't let him... Yes, you can. Damon's voice was gentle but firm. Because here's the thing about Malcolm. He doesn't do anything halfway. Once he decides to help someone, he commits fully. Fighting him on it is just wasting energy you need for other things. So let him do this. Let us do this. And when you're ready, when you're stable, you can pay it forward to someone else who needs it. Claire looked at him, this stranger who was treating her with more kindness than most of her own family ever had, and felt something shift in her understanding of the world. Maybe there really were good people out there. Maybe not everyone was waiting to take advantage or demand something in return. Maybe sometimes help was just help, offered freely because someone believed you deserved it. Thank you, she said, and this time the words felt adequate, felt like they carried the weight of everything she couldn't articulate. Damon smiled and squeezed her shoulder. Welcome home, Claire. That night, after Damon had left and Claire had fed Lily and changed her into fresh pajamas and laid her down in the portable crib Malcolm had somehow procured within hours, Claire stood at the window of her new apartment and looked out at the city lights. Somewhere out there, Ethan was either living his life without them or he was gone in a way that meant he'd never be found. Either way, she couldn't keep waiting for him to come back. She couldn't keep building her life around the ghost of what they'd almost had. She had to move forward. For Lily. For herself. For the chance that Malcolm and Damon had given her to become something more than just a cautionary tale about a system that failed the people who needed it most. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "This is Malcolm. Just checking in. You both settled okay?" Claire smiled and typed back, "We're good. Better than good. Thank you doesn't cover it, but thank you." The response came quickly. "You're welcome. Get some rest. Tomorrow's a new start." Claire set the phone down and crawled into the bed that still smelled like fresh linens and new beginnings. For the first time in months, she fell asleep without fear, without the weight of tomorrow's uncertainty crushing her chest. She fell asleep in a real bed, in a safe place, with her daughter breathing peacefully nearby. She fell asleep believing that maybe, just maybe, they were going to be okay. But in the morning, everything would change again. Because across the city, in a hospital that specialized in long-term care, a patient was waking up from a coma that had held him prisoner for 8 months. His first words, whispered through cracked lips to a nurse who'd grown fond of him during his silent vigil, were simple but devastating. "Claire. Where's Claire? Where's my baby?" And the nurse, who'd seen his driver's license and knew his name, who'd watched him fight his way back from brain injury and broken bones, picked up the phone to call the social worker who'd been handling his case. Because Ethan Cole was awake, and he was looking for the family he'd never meant to leave behind. The nurse's name was Patricia Owens, and she'd worked in the long-term care unit at Mercy General for 17 years. She'd seen patients wake from comas before, some lucid, some confused, some so damaged by their injuries that consciousness was more curse than blessing. But she'd never seen someone wake up with such clarity, such immediate purpose, such desperate need to find someone who might not even know they were missing. Ethan Cole had been admitted 8 months ago as a John Doe, his face so swollen from the accident that even his fingerprints had been difficult to process through the backlog at the overworked police department. A hit and run on a rainy night, the driver never found, Ethan left for dead in an alley 3 blocks from the apartment he'd shared with Claire. By the time someone had found him and called 911, he'd already been unconscious for hours, his brain swelling dangerously, his body broken in ways that suggested he'd been thrown a considerable distance. The doctors had induced a coma to let his brain heal. They'd warned that he might never wake up, that if he did, he might not be the same person he'd been before. But Patricia had talked to him anyway during her shifts, read him news articles and sports scores, played music she thought he might like based on the single tattoo visible on his forearm, lyrics from a Bruce Springsteen song about hope and highways and finding your way home. She'd grown attached. It happened sometimes with long-term patients, the ones who stayed long enough to become familiar, who became part of the landscape of her working life. She'd advocated for him when the hospital administration had wanted to transfer him to a state facility, had helped the social worker track down the few scattered pieces of his identity when his belongings had finally been processed. A wallet with $63 and a driver's license, a phone too damaged to recover, an apartment key that led to a vacant unit with no forwarding address, no family, no emergency contacts, no one looking for him. Until now. "Claire," Ethan whispered again, his hand gripping Patricia's with surprising strength for someone who'd been immobile for months. "Please, I need to find her. She was pregnant. She's alone. She thinks I left her." Patricia's heart broke at the desperation in his voice. She pressed the call button for Dr. Rahman, the neurologist who'd been overseeing Ethan's care, and kept her hand in his. "It's okay," she said softly. "You're safe. You're in a hospital. You were in an accident, honey. You've been here for 8 months." The words didn't seem to register. Ethan tried to sit up, panic flooding his features as the reality of his situation hit him. The IV lines, the catheter, the muscle atrophy that made his legs feel like dead weight, the gap in time he couldn't account for. 8 months? His voice cracked. No, that's not possible. I just went out. I was going to see my cousin about a job opportunity, something that would pay better so Claire wouldn't have to work so hard. I was going to surprise her. I was going to... He broke off, his breathing rapid and shallow. The baby. She had the baby. I wasn't there. I missed everything. Dr. Rahman arrived then, a calm presence in expensive shoes and wire-rimmed glasses, and began the assessment that would determine just how much of Ethan Cole had survived the accident. The tests were extensive: cognitive function, motor skills, memory, emotional regulation. Ethan cooperated with growing frustration, answering questions about the date he remembered last, the president, his address, Claire's name spelled forward and backward, and a dozen other ways that proved he was still himself inside the broken machinery of his healing body. "You're remarkably intact," Dr. Rahman said finally, unable to hide his surprise. "Given the severity of your injuries, the fact that you're this coherent is borderline miraculous. But you need to understand that recovery is going to take time. Your muscles have atrophied. You'll need physical therapy, occupational therapy, psychological support to process the trauma and the time you've lost." "I don't need therapy," Ethan said roughly. "I need to find Claire Hart. Please. Someone has to know where she is. Someone has to be looking for her." Patricia exchanged glances with Dr. Rahman. "Mr. Cole, when you were admitted, we tried to locate your next of kin. We found no records of a Claire Hart connected to you in any official capacity. No shared lease, no emergency contact listings, no—" "She wouldn't be listed," Ethan interrupted. "We weren't married. We kept things separate because I was helping her avoid her ex-foster parents trying to claim her income tax returns. But she's real. She's out there. And she needs to know I didn't leave her." The raw pain in his voice made Patricia want to promise him everything would be okay, that they'd find Claire, that his baby was safe. But she'd been a nurse too long to make promises she couldn't keep. "Let me contact our social worker," she said instead. "Jennifer's been handling your case. If anyone can help track down Claire, it's her." Ethan nodded, exhaustion finally overtaking the adrenaline that had fueled his panic. His eyes were already closing as Patricia dimmed the lights and stepped out into the hallway, pulling her phone from her pocket. The text she sent to Jennifer Chen, the hospital's senior social worker, was brief. "John Doe in 412 is awake. Name is Ethan Cole. Looking for Claire Hart, pregnant girlfriend, when accident occurred 8 months ago. Urgent." The response came within minutes. "On my way." While Patricia returned to check Ethan's vitals and ensure he was resting comfortably, Jennifer was already at her computer, running searches through databases that most people didn't even know existed. Claire Hart was a common enough name that she got hundreds of hits initially, but when she narrowed it by age and location and cross-referenced with social services, shelter systems, and hospital records, the list became manageable. What she found made her stomach turn. Claire Hart had given birth to a daughter, Lily Marie Hart, at Mercy General, the same hospital where Ethan had been a patient 7 months ago. The birth had been coded as indigent care, meaning Claire had no insurance, no permanent address, no support system. The notes from the attending physician mentioned concerns about postpartum depression, about Claire's living situation, about her ability to care for an infant while homeless. There were follow-up recommendations for social services, for housing assistance, for mental health support, none of which had been followed up on because Claire had disappeared from the system entirely after discharge. Jennifer picked up her phone and called Patricia. "I found her, or at least I found records of her. She gave birth here 7 months ago. But after that, nothing. No address, no phone number, no contact information that's still current. So she could be anywhere. Or nowhere." Jennifer's voice was grim. "If she was homeless when she gave birth, there's no telling where she ended up. Best case, she found shelter. Worst case—" "Don't say it," Patricia cut in. "We'll find her. We have to. But finding someone who'd fallen through the cracks of a system designed to catch people was like finding a specific grain of sand on a beach." Jennifer spent the rest of her shift making calls to shelters, soup kitchens, churches, community organizations, anywhere that might have come into contact with a young white woman with a baby named Lily. Most had no records. Some had privacy policies that prevented them from sharing information even if they did. One shelter director remembered a Claire who'd stayed for 3 nights in September but hadn't been seen since. The trail was cold, and getting colder by the hour. Meanwhile, across the city in her new apartment, Claire was experiencing the surreal novelty of waking up without fear. Sunlight streamed through clean windows. Lily babbled happily in her crib, well-fed and warm, and showing no signs of the fever that had terrified Claire just days ago. The apartment smelled like the coffee Malcolm had had delivered along with the furniture. Expensive, rich, nothing like the instant crystals dissolved in lukewarm tap water that Claire had been surviving on. She made herself a cup and stood at the window, watching the world wake up below her. People walked dogs, jogged through the small park across the street, carried groceries and briefcases and children to wherever their mornings took them. Normal lives. Regular lives. The kind of existence Claire had only ever observed from the outside. Now she was on the inside. The thought was both thrilling and terrifying. Her phone buzzed with a text from Damon. "Morning! How'd you sleep?" Claire smiled and typed back, "Better than I have in months. Thank you again for everything. Malcolm and I are coming by around 10 with some things for Lily. Hope that's okay." "More than okay. See you then." She used the next 2 hours to familiarize herself with the apartment, to figure out which cabinet should hold dishes and which drawer was best for utensils, to make the space feel less like a generous stranger's property and more like home. When the knock came at 10 sharp, she opened the door to find Malcolm and Damon loaded down with bags from baby stores she'd only ever walked past, never entered. "We may have gone a little overboard," Damon admitted, hauling in packages that clinked with bottles and rustled with diapers and bulged with soft things in pastel colors. Malcolm followed with a large box that he set down carefully in the living room. "Car seat," he explained, "and a stroller that's actually designed for city sidewalks. Not that death trap you were pushing around." Claire's throat tightened. "You didn't have to—" "We know," Malcolm interrupted gently, "but we wanted to. Let us do this, Claire, please." So she did. She let them unpack onesies and board books and teething rings and a mobile that played gentle lullabies. She let them set up the car seat and show her how the safety straps worked, let them demonstrate the stroller's features like they were genuinely excited about suspension systems and one-hand folding mechanisms. And when Lily woke from her nap, she let Damon scoop her up and coo at her while Malcolm assembled a playmat with hanging toys that made the baby's eyes go wide with wonder. "She's beautiful," Damon said softly, and there was something wistful in his voice that made Claire wonder what losses he carried, what might-have-beens haunted his generous heart. "She looks like her father," Claire found herself saying. "Same eyes, same stubborn chin." Malcolm glanced up from where he was securing the last corner of the playmat. "Do you have any pictures of him?" Claire shook her head. "My phone died months ago, and I couldn't afford to replace it. Everything I had was on there, photos, contacts, everything. It's all gone now." "What was his full name, Ethan Cole, you said?" "Yeah, why?" Malcolm pulled out his phone. "Just curious. Sometimes people leave digital footprints even when they disappear physically. Social media, old email accounts, things like that." He was being casual about it, but Claire sensed purpose underneath. Malcolm wasn't the type to do anything without intention. Still, she appreciated the effort, even if it was futile. She'd searched for Ethan herself in every way she could think of before her phone died, had scoured Facebook and Instagram and LinkedIn for any trace of him. Nothing, like he'd been erased from existence. "Let me know if you find anything," she said, trying to keep the hope out of her voice and failing. "But I'm not holding my breath. If he wanted to be found, he would be." Malcolm didn't respond, just kept typing, his expression unreadable. Damon noticed the shift in energy and redirected smoothly, pulling Claire into conversation about the community center where she might work, about the kind of training they could provide, about childcare options that would let her actually build a career instead of just surviving job to job. "The director's name is Angela Martinez," Damon explained. "She started as a client herself, worked her way up, and now she runs 3 centers across the city. She's tough but fair, and she doesn't waste time on people who don't want to put in the work. But for those who do, she'll move mountains." "When do I meet her?" "How about Friday? Gives you a few more days to settle in, get Lily fully adjusted to the new space. Malcolm can watch her while we go talk to Angela." Claire blinked. Malcolm's going to babysit? Malcolm looked up from his phone, one eyebrow raised. I helped raise Damon. I think I can handle one 8-month-old for a few hours. I was a nightmare child, Damon Stage whispered to Claire. If he survived me, Lily will be a vacation. Despite everything, Claire laughed. Real laughter that came from somewhere deep and genuine. The kind she'd almost forgotten she was capable of. It felt good. It felt like healing. They stayed for lunch, ordering Thai food from a place that delivered in actual dishes instead of foam containers, and ate together on Claire's new floor since the dining table wouldn't arrive until tomorrow. Lily sat in her bouncy seat, gnawing on a teething toy and watching the adults with solemn interest. And for the first time in recent memory, Claire felt like she was part of something. Not charity, not pity, but actual community, actual connection, actual care that didn't come with a price tag or an expiration date. After Malcolm and Damon left, promising to check in tomorrow, Claire spent the afternoon playing with Lily on the mat, watching her daughter discover that batting at the hanging elephant made it swing, that pulling the lion's tail triggered a gentle roar. The baby's laughter was the most beautiful sound in the world, and Claire found herself thinking that maybe, just maybe, they were going to make it. She didn't know that across town, Jennifer Chen had finally caught a break. A director at a women's shelter had called back with information about a Claire Hart who'd stayed briefly in October with an infant daughter. The director remembered her because Claire had helped reorganize their donation closet during her 3-day stay, had created a system that made everything more accessible and efficient. But she'd left without warning, and no one had seen her since. The director had one more piece of information. Claire had mentioned working at a diner on 7th Street before she'd lost her job due to pregnancy. There were only 3 diners on 7th. Jennifer started calling. The third one answered on the second ring. Rosie's Diner, this is Donna speaking. Hi, I'm looking for information about a former employee, Claire Hart. She would have worked there about a year ago. There was a pause. Who's asking? Jennifer explained about Ethan, about the accident, about his desperate need to find Claire and their daughter. She kept her voice professional but let the emotion through, the urgency, the human stakes underneath the bureaucratic process. Donna was quiet for so long Jennifer thought she'd hung up. Then, she came in 2 days ago. Jennifer's heart jumped. She did? With a man, wealthy guy, fancy suit, paid her tab with $100 bills, and watched her like she mattered. I figured maybe she'd gotten help. Maybe things were looking up for her. She needed it. That girl was barely surviving last time I saw her. Do you have any way to contact her? No, honey, I'm sorry. But if she comes back in, I can tell her someone's looking for her. Is it good news or bad news? Jennifer considered. It's complicated news, but I think she'd want to know. She left her contact information and hung up, feeling simultaneously closer and further from finding Claire. The woman existed, was alive, was being helped by someone with resources. But without a phone number or address, Jennifer was still operating blind. She called Patricia with the update, and together they made a decision. They would tell Ethan what they'd found, that Claire had given birth, that she'd been homeless but was now apparently receiving help, that they were working on locating her. It wasn't much, but it was something. It was hope. When Patricia entered Ethan's room that evening, she found him attempting physical therapy exercises in bed, his face twisted with pain and determination as he tried to lift his atrophied legs against gravity. You're supposed to wait for the physical therapist, she chided gently. Can't wait. Need to get stronger. Need to find them. Ethan's voice was strained but resolute. Did you find anything? Patricia pulled up a chair and took his hand. We found records showing that Claire gave birth to a daughter named Lily 7 months ago at this hospital. She's alive, Ethan. They both are. The relief that washed over Ethan's face was so profound it brought tears to Patricia's eyes. He closed his eyes and took a shuddering breath, and when he spoke, his voice was thick with emotion. Where are they? That's what we're still working on. Claire was homeless for a while, but according to a recent sighting, she's receiving help from someone with resources. We're trying to track down more specific information. I need to see them. I need to explain. She thinks I abandoned her. She thinks I chose to leave. Ethan's grip tightened on Patricia's hand. I loved her. I love her. I would never... I know, honey. I know. And we're going to make sure she knows too. But you need to focus on getting stronger first. You can't help them if you can't walk." It was harsh but true, and Ethan knew it. He nodded slowly and lay back against the pillows, his eyes fixed on the ceiling. "Tell me about the baby." "Lily, what do the records say?" Patricia hesitated. The records said Lily had been born underweight, that there were concerns about her development, that Claire had been advised to bring her in for follow-up appointments she'd never made. But Ethan didn't need those details yet. He needed hope. "She was born healthy," Patricia said carefully, "and according to the woman at the diner who saw Claire recently, the baby looked well cared for. Your girlfriend's a fighter, Ethan. She kept your daughter safe even when she had nothing." "That's Claire." A small smile touched Ethan's lips despite the tears streaming down his face. "She's the strongest person I've ever known. She survived things that would have broken most people, and she just kept going. I knew she'd protect our baby. I knew it." He closed his eyes, exhaustion finally winning, and Patricia stayed with him until his breathing evened out into sleep. Then she returned to the nurse's station and found Jennifer waiting with new information. "I think I know who's helping her," Jennifer said quietly, showing Patricia her phone screen. "I did a search for wealthy men making headlines for charitable acts in the past week, and this came up." The article was from a local news site dated 3 days ago, with a headline that read, "Crosstech CEO Malcolm Cross uses social media to search for homeless mother." The accompanying photo showed Malcolm in a business suit, his expression serious, and the article detailed how he'd posted across multiple platforms, asking for information about Claire Hart after a chance encounter had left him concerned for her welfare. "He found her," Patricia breathed, "and he's been helping her. More than that. Look at this." Jennifer pulled up Malcolm's social media profile, which had been updated hours ago with a photo of a baby playing with toys on a colorful mat. The caption read, "Sometimes the best meetings are the ones that happen on your living room floor. Second chances, #community matters." The baby in the photo had Ethan's eyes. "That's Lily," Patricia said with certainty, "which means Claire is wherever Malcolm Cross is keeping her safe." Jennifer was already typing. "Crosstech has a corporate office downtown. I'll call first thing tomorrow, see if I can get through to someone who can connect us with Cross. If he's been helping Claire, he needs to know about Ethan." "This is good," Patricia said, allowing herself to feel optimistic for the first time since Ethan had woken up. "This is really good." But neither of them could have anticipated how complicated good news could become when it collided with grief, hope, guilt, and the messy reality of lives torn apart and slowly, painfully being rebuilt. Because when Claire finally learned that Ethan was alive, that he hadn't abandoned her, that he'd been fighting his way back to her from the edge of death, she would have to reconcile the story she'd told herself for 8 months with a truth that changed everything. And Malcolm would have to confront the reality that helping Claire might mean losing her to the man she'd never stopped loving. The call came to Malcolm's office at 9:47 on a Thursday morning, routed through 3 different assistants before it reached his desk. He'd been reviewing quarterly projections with his CFO when his personal line buzzed, the one only a handful of people had access to, the one that meant something urgent, something that couldn't wait. "Excuse me," he said to the CFO, picking up the receiver. "Malcolm Cross." "Mr. Cross, my name is Jennifer Chen. I'm a social worker at Mercy General Hospital. I'm calling about Claire Hart." Malcolm's spine straightened. He waved the CFO out of the room and closed the door. "Is she okay? Is the baby okay?" "They're fine as far as I know, but I'm calling because I have information I believe Claire needs to hear, and I'm hoping you can help me reach her." Jennifer paused. "It's about Ethan Cole." The name hit Malcolm like a punch to the chest. He'd spent the past 2 days running searches on Ethan Cole, pulling every string he had to track down the man who'd disappeared on Claire. What he'd found was nothing. No employment records after 8 months ago, no social media activity, no credit card transactions, no phone activity. The man had simply vanished, and Malcolm had begun to suspect the worst. Foul play, overdose, suicide. Something that explained why someone who'd apparently loved Claire would abandon her so completely. "What about him?" Malcolm asked carefully. "He's here, at Mercy General. He woke up from a coma 2 days ago. Malcolm sat down heavily in his chair. A coma. He was hit by a car the day he left Claire, 8 months ago. Hit and run, never solved. He's been unconscious this whole time. When he woke up, the first thing he asked for was Claire and their baby. He has no idea she's been homeless, no idea she gave birth alone, no idea she thinks he abandoned her. Mr. Cross, he didn't leave her. He's been here fighting for his life, and now he's desperate to find them. The information rearranged everything Malcolm thought he understood about Claire's story. The grief she'd carried, the abandonment she'd survived, the strength it had taken to raise Lily alone. All of it built on a tragedy neither of them had known about. Ethan hadn't chosen to leave. He'd been stolen away by violence and circumstance, held captive by his own broken body while the woman he loved suffered. "Does he know where she is?" Malcolm asked. "No. We've been trying to track her down through shelters and social services, and that's when we found your social media posts from earlier this week. The photo you posted. That's Lily, isn't it?" Malcolm glanced at his phone, at the picture of the baby laughing on the playmat, her tiny hands reaching for the elephant mobile. "Yes." "Then you know where Claire is, and you need to tell her about Ethan before she hears it some other way. She deserves to know the truth." Malcolm's jaw tightened. Jennifer was right, of course. Claire deserved to know. But the thought of delivering this news, of watching her world reorganize around information that would change everything, it felt like too much responsibility, too much potential for pain. "Can I bring her to the hospital?" he asked. "Let them see each other. Let her hear it from him directly." That would be ideal, but Mr. Cross is still in rough shape. He's doing physical therapy, relearning how to walk. The doctors are optimistic, but it's going to be a long recovery. She should be prepared for that. "I'll bring her this afternoon. What room?" Jennifer gave him the details, then added softly, "Mr. Cross seems like a good man, Mr. Cross. He really loves her. Whatever help you've been giving Claire, I want you to know it meant everything, but she's going to need different help now. She's going to need support figuring out how to navigate this reunion, how to integrate Ethan back into her life, how to build a family out of broken pieces." "I understand." Malcolm's voice was steady, professional, giving nothing away. "Thank you for calling." He hung up and sat in silence for a long moment, staring at the city skyline through his floor-to-ceiling windows. He'd known this moment was coming in some form, the moment when Claire's life moved forward beyond his capacity to help, when she became someone else's responsibility, someone else's priority. He just hadn't expected it to feel like loss. The drive to Claire's apartment took 20 minutes through midday traffic. Malcolm used the time to rehearse how he'd tell her, what words he'd use to deliver news that would be both devastating and miraculous. He'd never been good at emotional conversations, preferring the clean lines of business deals and strategic planning to the messy reality of human feelings. But this wasn't something he could delegate or postpone. Claire answered the door with Lily on her hip, both of them looking healthier than they had just days ago. Claire's face had color now, her eyes brighter, her smile genuine when she saw him. "Malcolm, I wasn't expecting you until tomorrow. Come in. I was just—" She stopped, reading his expression. "What's wrong?" He stepped inside and closed the door carefully. "We need to talk. You should sit down." Fear flickered across her features. "Is it the apartment? Did something happen? Are you—" "It's not about me. It's about Ethan." Claire went very still. The color drained from her face and she moved mechanically to the couch, settling Lily beside her with a protective hand on the baby's stomach. "What about him?" Malcolm sat across from her and forced himself to meet her eyes. "He's alive, Claire. He's at Mercy General. He was in an accident the day he left you, hit by a car, left for dead. He's been in a coma for 8 months. He woke up 2 days ago asking for you." The words hung in the air between them like something fragile and explosive. Claire's expression cycled through disbelief, shock, hope, and something that looked like grief so profound it bordered on rage. "No," she whispered. "No, that's not possible. I looked for him. I called everyone. The police said he was admitted as a John Doe. His identification was damaged in the accident and processing was delayed. By the time they figured out who he was, you'd already disappeared into the shelter system. He couldn't contact you because he was unconscious, and you couldn't find him because you didn't know where to look." Claire's hands were shaking. She pressed them against her thighs, her breathing shallow and rapid. He's really alive? Yes. And he was in a coma this whole time? Yes. So he didn't leave me. Her voice broke on the words. He didn't choose to abandon us. No. He loves you, Claire. The social worker said the first words out of his mouth were your name and asking about the baby. Claire started crying then, deep, wrenching sobs that seemed to come from somewhere ancient and wounded, a place that had been holding on to pain for so long it had calcified into identity. Malcolm wanted to comfort her, but sensed she needed space to feel this, to let it break her open so she could start healing. Lily, sensing her mother's distress, began to cry too. Claire scooped her up and held her close, rocking back and forth, and Malcolm sat witness to their grief and relief and the complicated tangle of emotions that came with learning that the worst thing you'd believed about someone you loved was never true. I need to see him, Claire said finally, wiping her eyes with the heel of her hand. Now, today, please. I'll drive you. Malcolm stood and grabbed his keys. But Claire, you should know. He's still recovering. He can't walk yet. He's weak. It's going to take time for him to get back to who he was. I don't care. Claire was already gathering Lily's diaper bag, moving with purpose despite her tears. I don't care if he never walks again. I just need him to know we're okay, that we survived, that I never stopped. She broke off, unable to finish. The drive to Mercy General was quiet except for Lily's babbling from her new car seat. Claire stared out the window, her fingers twisted together in her lap, her face a mask of anticipation and fear. Malcolm wanted to say something reassuring but couldn't find words that didn't sound hollow or presumptuous. At the hospital, Jennifer met them in the lobby, her expression warm but cautious. Claire? Claire nodded, unable to speak. I'm Jennifer Chen. We spoke on the phone with Mr. Cross. Ethan is in room 412. He doesn't know you're coming. We thought it would be better as a surprise. But I want to prepare you for what you're going to see. He's thin. He has scars from the surgeries. He's using a walker. He's not the same man you remember physically, but mentally, emotionally. He's still Ethan. Okay? Claire's voice was barely a whisper. Jennifer led them to the elevator and Malcolm followed, carrying the diaper bag, feeling like an intruder on a moment that wasn't his, but unable to abandon Claire when she might need support. The fourth floor was quiet, the hallway sterile and bright, and when they reached room 412, Jennifer knocked softly before pushing the door open. Ethan was standing by the window using a walker, his back to the door, his frame painfully thin beneath a hospital gown and sweatpants. At the sound of the door, he turned, and his eyes went directly to Claire. For a moment, no one moved. No one breathed. Then Ethan's face crumpled and he said her name like a prayer, like an apology, like coming home after being lost for a lifetime. Claire. She crossed the room in 3 steps and fell into his arms, and the walker clattered to the floor as they held each other and cried. Malcolm turned away, giving them privacy, his chest tight with emotion he couldn't quite name. Jennifer touched his arm gently and guided him back into the hallway, closing the door behind them. They need time, she said quietly. Malcolm nodded. Through the small window in the door, he could see Claire and Ethan on the floor where they'd collapsed together, still holding on like letting go would mean losing each other again. Lily was between them, and Ethan's hand was trembling as he reached out to touch his daughter's face for the first time. Thank you for bringing her, Jennifer said. A lot of people wouldn't have. A lot of people would have seen this as a complication and tried to keep them apart. Malcolm looked at her sharply. Why would I do that? Because you care about her. Anyone can see that. And watching someone you care about reunite with someone they love more, it's not easy. The observation was too accurate to deny and too painful to acknowledge. Malcolm just turned back to the window and watched Claire introduce Ethan to their daughter, watched the broken man on the floor discover that his family had survived without him, that they were whole and safe and here. She's going to need help, Malcolm said finally. Ethan's recovery is going to take months. They'll need a place to live together, income, support. Claire was just starting to get stable and now everything's changed again. That's where people like us come in. Jennifer pulled out her phone. I'm going to connect them with every resource we have. Housing assistance, Medicaid, physical therapy, counseling. Ethan qualifies for victim compensation from the state since the hit and run was never solved. It won't be much, but it'll help. And Claire's already lined up for that job at the community center, right? Interviews tomorrow. Good, she can still do that. She's going to need the income and the structure, especially now. And Ethan will need a purpose too once he's mobile enough to work. They stood in the hallway planning logistics while inside the room, Claire was telling Ethan everything about the pregnancy progressing alone, about the birth, about the shelters, and the streets, and the rain, about the night Malcolm stopped, about the apartment, about the help that had kept them alive. "I thought you left," she kept saying, her hands framing his face like she needed to confirm he was real. "I thought you didn't want us." "Never." Ethan's voice was hoarse with emotion. "I wanted you more than anything. I was going to see my cousin Marcus about a job that paid better, enough that you could quit the diner and focus on the baby. I wanted to take care of you both. I wanted to be the man you deserved." "You are. You always were." Claire kissed him softly, carefully, aware of how fragile he still was. "We survived, Ethan. We made it. And now we get to build something together." Ethan looked down at Lily, who was staring at him with solemn curiosity, her tiny hand wrapped around his finger. "She's perfect. She's so perfect. She looks like you. She looks like us." Ethan's smile was watery but genuine. "She looks like hope." They stayed like that until a nurse came to check Ethan's vitals and insisted he get back in bed before he undid all his physical therapy progress. Claire helped him settle, then sat beside him with Lily in her arms, and they talked for hours about everything and nothing, filling in the gaps of 8 months lost. Malcolm left after an hour, sensing they needed privacy and knowing his presence was becoming more awkward than helpful. He told Claire to call if she needed anything, that the apartment was still hers, that he'd be available whenever she needed support. She hugged him tight and whispered thank you in a way that felt like goodbye, and Malcolm accepted it with grace he didn't feel. In the parking garage, he called Damon. "It's done. She's with him." "You okay?" "Yeah, no, I don't know." Malcolm leaned against his car and stared at nothing. "I'm happy for her. I really am. But it feels like I'm losing someone important and I never even had them in the first place." Damon was quiet for a moment. "You gave her something important, Mal. You gave her a chance. You gave her stability when she had nothing. You can't measure that in whether she stays in your life or not. You measure it in the fact that she survived, that her daughter survived, that they're going to be okay. That's what Mom would have wanted for someone in Claire's position. That's what you did." "I know." Malcolm's voice was rough. "I just wish it didn't hurt." "It hurts because you're human. And that's not a weakness, brother. That's proof you're doing this for the right reasons." Malcolm hung up and drove home to his empty penthouse. And for the first time in years, he let himself feel the full weight of his loneliness. He'd built an empire, donated millions, helped countless people through Crosstech's various initiatives. But he'd never built a family. He'd never let anyone close enough to matter, to hurt, to heal. Maybe it was time to change that. Over the following weeks, Claire and Ethan's story unfolded in ways that were messy and beautiful and real. Ethan was discharged from the hospital into a rehabilitation facility where he could continue intensive physical therapy while Claire visited daily with Lily. The baby's presence became a motivating force for Ethan's recovery. He pushed through pain and exhaustion because he wanted to hold his daughter without assistance, wanted to walk beside Claire instead of relying on her for basic mobility. Claire took the job at the community center and proved to be everything Angela Martinez had hoped for: organized, empathetic, efficient, and deeply committed to helping people navigate the same systems that had failed her. She worked 30 hours a week, enough to qualify for benefits, and saved every penny she could toward the future. Malcolm kept his distance, but stayed involved peripherally. He arranged for the apartment to transition into long-term housing for Claire, Ethan, and Lily at a rent they could actually afford once Ethan was working. He connected Ethan with Crosstech's partner companies, helped him find a job in logistics that accommodated his physical limitations, and paid enough to build stability. He did all of this quietly, through intermediaries, because he understood that Claire and Ethan needed space to build their family without feeling indebted to the man who'd helped save them. But Damon stayed close. He visited regularly, brought Lily gifts, took Claire to coffee when she needed someone to talk to who wasn't Ethan or a client or a supervisor. He became the bridge between Malcolm's quiet generosity and Claire's new reality, The translator who ensured Malcolm's help was received as support rather than obligation. 3 months after Ethan woke up, when he could walk independently and had started his new job, when Claire had been promoted to senior coordinator at the community center, when Lily was taking her first steps between her parents' outstretched hands, Damon arranged a dinner. Malcolm almost refused. The thought of sitting across from Claire and Ethan, watching them be happy together, felt like volunteering for pain. But Damon insisted with a firmness that suggested this was important in ways Malcolm didn't fully understand yet. The restaurant was small and intimate, the kind of place where people celebrated anniversaries and proposals and moments that mattered. Malcolm arrived first and sat at the reserved table feeling awkward and out of place. Then Claire and Ethan walked in, holding Lily between them, and Malcolm's chest tightened at how right they looked together, how complete, how healed, how much like the family they'd almost lost the chance to become. Malcolm. Claire's smile was warm and genuine as she approached the table. Thank you for coming. Of course. He stood and shook Ethan's hand, noting how much stronger the younger man looked, how the haunted edge had faded from his eyes. You look good, both of you. We feel good. Ethan settled Lily in a high chair and sat down beside Claire, his hand finding hers automatically. Better than we have in a long time. They ordered food and made small talk about work and physical therapy and Lily's latest accomplishments. The conversation was easy, comfortable, and Malcolm found himself relaxing despite his earlier anxiety. This wasn't painful. It was just people who'd survived terrible things finding ways to move forward. After the main course, Claire pulled a small wrapped box from her purse and slid it across the table to Malcolm. We wanted to give you something, as thanks. Malcolm stared at the box like it might explode. That's not necessary. I didn't do anything that requires... Open it, Ethan said quietly. Please. Malcolm unwrapped the paper carefully to reveal a simple wooden picture frame. Inside was a photo of Claire, Ethan, and Lily on the floor of Claire's apartment, all three of them laughing at something off camera. Across the bottom, someone had written in elegant script, "Family is built by the people who show up. Thank you for showing up when it mattered most." Malcolm's throat tightened. He looked up to find both Claire and Ethan watching him with expressions of gratitude so profound it made him feel unworthy. We named you Lily's godfather, Claire said softly, if that's okay with you, because you saved her life. You saved both our lives, and we want her to grow up knowing that there are good people in the world who help without expecting anything in return. I'd be honored. Malcolm's voice was rough but steady. Thank you. The dinner continued with lighter energy after that, and when Lily started getting fussy, Malcolm surprised everyone by offering to walk her around the restaurant while Claire and Ethan finished dessert. He carried the baby past tables and windows, pointing out lights and colors, and making silly faces that made her giggle, and realized with sudden clarity that this connection, this chosen family, this proof that helping someone could create bonds that mattered, was worth more than any business deal or financial success. When he returned Lily to her parents, Ethan stood and pulled Malcolm into a tight hug. I don't know how to thank you for what you did, he said quietly, but I promise you'll always have a place in our lives. You're family now. Malcolm hugged him back and realized that this was what his mother would have wanted. Not for him to save everyone, not for him to carry the weight of every person who reminded him of her, but to show up when it mattered and trust that the people he helped would pay it forward, would build lives that honored the sacrifice and struggle that came before. 6 months later, Malcolm got a call from Angela Martinez at the community center. Claire had developed a program for helping formerly homeless mothers navigate the transition to stable housing, and the program was so successful that Angela wanted to expand it to all 3 centers. She needed funding and was hoping Crosstech might be interested in partnering. Malcolm said yes immediately. Then he asked if Claire would be willing to present the program to his board of directors, to share her story and her expertise with people who needed to understand that poverty wasn't a moral failure, but a systemic problem with systemic solutions. Claire presented 3 weeks later in the Crosstech conference room, standing before a room full of executives and investors with Lily and a carrier on her back. She spoke about the gaps in social services, about the ways the system failed people who were trying their hardest, about the difference between charity and dignity. She spoke about the night Malcolm stopped in the rain and how that single moment of seeing someone as human had cascaded into stability, employment, family, and now opportunity to help others. "I'm not special," she concluded, her voice steady and strong. "I'm just one person who got lucky enough to be seen by someone who cared enough to stop. But there are thousands like me out there right now, standing on corners in the rain, trying to keep their babies warm, fighting to survive another day. They're not statistics. They're not problems. They're people who deserve the same chance I got. And with your support, we can give it to them." The board approved the funding unanimously. After the meeting, Malcolm found Claire in his office, looking at the photo she and Ethan had given him, which he'd framed on his desk. "You did good in there," he said. Claire smiled. "I learned from the best. You taught me that asking for help isn't weakness, it's strategy, it's survival. It's how we build something bigger than ourselves." "Your mother would be proud," she added, and Malcolm's eyes burned because she was right, because he'd finally found a way to honor his mother's memory that felt true and lasting and good. That night, Malcolm had dinner at Claire and Ethan's apartment. Lily crawled around showing off her newfound mobility, and Ethan cooked pasta that was almost as good as the Italian place down the street, and Damon arrived late with wine and stories about his latest business venture. They ate together at a table that had come from a secondhand store, in an apartment that had started as charity and become home, surrounded by the kind of wealth that couldn't be measured in dollars or square footage, but only in laughter and belonging, and the quiet certainty that they'd all survived their worst moments and come out stronger on the other side. As Malcolm was leaving, Claire walked him to the door and hugged him tight. "Thank you," she said for the 1,000th time, "for everything." "Thank you for letting me help," Malcolm replied, "for showing me that stopping matters, that seeing people matters, that one moment of choosing to care can change everything." He drove home through streets that had witnessed so much suffering, so much invisible pain, so many people like Claire and Ethan and his own mother who'd needed someone to stop and see them. And he made a promise to himself and to the memory of the woman who'd raised him to keep showing up, keep stopping, keep seeing the people everyone else looked past. Because that was how you honored the dead, by helping the living build lives worth celebrating. And in the end, that was enough.